I'm Bob Crawford,
I'm Ben Sawyer.
and this is The Road to Now.
Yes, it is. The Road to Now. Our guest today, the author of 8 books with 4 pets and multiple children and many jobs, a man you might know from one of those, Jake Tapper. Welcome to the show.
It's so great to be here. And for those listening, I just spent about 15 minutes talking about how much I love the Avett Brothers. So don't think that I didn't already say that.
It's always great when somebody brings that up because then I just like to chime in and be like, they're awesome, aren't they?
They're so good. But I mean, I'm just the short version of what I just did is I just talked about how great they are. And I talked about how I think True Sadness is one of the most profound songs written in the last 50 years. So.
And I'm blushing.
He really is. I can see him.
I really feel that way. It's
the
just
ever
a beautiful
humble
song. Beautiful song.
Well, your book that you have out now that is coming out, if you're listening to the show, is out this week. Race Against Terror, Chasing an Al-Qaeda Killer at the Dawn of the Forever War. It's about the war on terror. I think for those of us living now, even those who lived through it, there are these key focal points we think about. 9/11, right? The invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, and these pivotal moments. But most of them take place on the battlefield. And what you show in this book is that this war is all encompassing. It's not just on the battlefield. It takes up the lives of people in the legal system around the world, people whose names you rarely hear, people who give everything to see people come to justice. Yeah. And I think this really expands our understanding of this all-encompassing war on terror. Could you just talk about your book and that context and what drove you to this topic?
So the book is about it's a nonfiction book, but I tried to write it like a thriller. I tried to write it like a page-turning true crime thriller. I've now written a few novels, and so I tried to take some of the lessons of that to this nonfiction book. It's about a terrorist, and it's about the sleuthing and tremendous effort that went to keep this guy off the streets because he was randomly kind of accidentally picked up by the Italians during the Arab Spring. He ends up on a refugee ship. The Italians tell the Americans, have you heard of this guy? The Americans have. His name is Spin Ghoul. His battle name is Spin Ghoul. The Americans have heard of him from other terrorists. And he is an extremist and a zealot, and he's killed Americans in Afghanistan. He wanted to blow up the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria. He tried to, and he is determined to kill as many Americans as he can. And the race is that the Italians are going to let him free. The Italians are going to stick him in a refugee camp where he can just walk out. Those refugee camps are not high security at all in Europe. And the Americans have to, prove the case against him. And so they're looking for fingerprint evidence, and they have to figure out which battle he killed Americans in and talk to the service members and this and that. And it's kind of the opposite of a whodunit because here's the bad guy, he did it, but what did he do and how do you prove it? And I love police procedurals. I love CSI and NCIS and Criminal Minds and Cold Case and all those shows. And when I heard this story randomly from one of the main characters in the book, who just happens to be the father of my son's friend, I was just captivated by all of the effort that went into the protection of the American people. Because we don't, as you know, we don't know who these people are. We haven't heard of assistant U.S. attorneys or individual FBI agents. And, we know Osama bin Laden, and maybe some people have heard of a couple other terrorists here and there, but the threat is unrelenting. It is just never ending. And there is this national security apparatus designed to keep us safe. We usually hear about them when they've screwed up or something. But generally speaking, these are men and women who are deadly serious about trying to protect the American people and do everything they can to protect us. And when I heard this story, I just thought, well, I need to tell it because in this book, you will meet not just the stories of the service members who served abroad and were killed or wounded in 2003 when this ambush took place, but all of the other individuals who are just doing everything they can to keep us safe and their individual stories, whether it's the fingerprint analyst at Quantico or the Muslim FBI agent or who resents how her religion's being twisted by Al-Qaeda, or the line prosecutors at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn. It's just a tribute to what they do. And I just thought when I heard the story, I just thought it was just so captivating, and I just wanted to know what happened next. And so I was just lucky enough to find the story so I could share it.
Jake, you were a reporter during the African embassy bombings in the late 90s. 9/11, you were reporter when Obama, well, during the CIA black sites, when all
Yeah.
that news broke, and Abu Ghraib, and Obama comes in, he's going to close down Guantanamo. These are all moments, beats in your book now, but you also reported on
Yeah.
many, if not all of these events. Talk about the process of writing this book, having already kind of lived through a lot of the background for it.
So, like everybody knows some of the broad strokes of this book, but what I hope this book accomplishes, in addition to just being a compelling story, is also just describing how these decisions impacted the attempts to keep Americans safe. So Barack Obama comes in. Well, it starts with honestly the decision by the Bush administration to allow enhanced interrogation, which others would consider to be torture, and those decisions, how they impacted the war on terror, which is it meant that a lot of people couldn't be prosecuted, a lot of bad guys couldn't be prosecuted because the evidence was tainted. And so there's that decision. There's also the decision of Obama, which is a reaction to the Bush administration. Every president is a reaction to the previous president. And then he makes decisions about wanting a more idealistic justice system. And so no more new prisoners in Guantanamo. And military commissions are probably not the best way to try these people. Let's do it in criminal courts. But the reaction, it's crazy now because this is happening now in Virginia. There is a criminal prosecution of a terrorist and nobody's blinking an eye. But back when Obama was talking about bringing terrorists to New York to try them, you would have thought that he was trying to bring like Thanos into Manhattan, like some sort of superhuman villain that could like shoot lightning out of his fingers. I mean, people were terrified at the notion of bringing Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or any of the 9/11 plotters from Gitmo to the United States. And there was a huge bipartisan outcry. So one of the things that was interesting in writing the book was taking these historical markers and seeing how the effort to prosecute this one guy was impacted one way or another. Trump comes to office in 2017, and the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, he's back where Republicans were a few years before. He doesn't want any of these people brought to the United States. Now with Spin Ghoul, that ship has sailed. He's already in prison in Brooklyn, but he doesn't want any future terrorists brought to the United States for trial. But here we are in 2025, and one of the big announcements President Trump made at his address to the joint session of Congress earlier this year was they found one of the conspirators behind the Abbey Gate bombing, this guy Jafar. And Jafar, captured by the CIA and the Pakistani intelligence services, is in a Virginia prison. So things change, things evolve. Some presidents might talk a certain way about the war on terror, others might talk a different way, but like there's still this effort to protect us. Sometimes mistakes are made, sometimes there are screw ups, et cetera, but that continues. And like using those benchmarks, it's just kind of interesting to see how this effort snaked around the history of these decisions by presidents.
To follow on that point, Ben, if I can, you talk about a terrorist who was brought to the United States and tried, and there's like 250 counts against him, and he almost beats the rap, right?
Oh,
They
yeah.
get him on a couple small things, and this really fuels Republicans and Democrats who are wary of bringing these guys to U.S. soil.
Right in the midst of this effort to bring Spin Ghoul to the United States to prove the case against him and then to try him in a court of law, to lock him away forever. And which, by the way, if they hadn't done that, the Italian, like he probably would have been taken to a refugee camp and he would have walked away and he would have killed any number of Americans. His goal was to replicate the 1998 embassy bombings in Tanzania and in Kenya. This guy, Galani, that you're talking about, he was tried on, there were, I think, 285 counts, and he was acquitted of 284 of them. And the reason was because a judge decided that one of the witnesses the prosecution only learned his name because of torture. And therefore he threw out that entire witness. And that made the case significantly weaker. And if it weren't for that one charge that the jury found him guilty on, Galani would have been freed. Now, I don't know, would he have been freed in the United States or would he have been shipped to Africa? I don't know. But here's a guy who had successfully contributed to the slaughter, the mass murder of Americans, and he would have been freed. So yeah, people were really skittish. And it was just interesting because I don't even remember paying attention to that trial. I don't even know if I covered it or not, and like who knows. But at a certain point, there's so many of these cases that the people stop paying attention to each individual one unless they're directly affected or they really focus on terrorism cases. But I don't even remember it. But that case was a huge case because it scared Democrats and Republicans. Oh my God, now it's not just that they have superhuman powers, but like if you bring them to the United States, there's a chance that they're going to be set free and they'll go to the local Starbucks and blow themselves up and kill 20 innocent people. A very real fear that was like a big problem for the people trying to bring the case against the Spin Ghoul, the guy in my book.
Yeah, the jury on that came in November of 2010. That was significant because this is not even 2 full years done in the Obama administration. He brings this vision, and the first example he brings of trying to shut down Gitmo is a massive PR disaster.
Huge. And like it was only because the jury, for whatever reason, convicted him on that one count, which basically carried a sentence of 20 years, that this guy wasn't freed. And here was an example for the Dick Cheneys and Liz Cheneys of the world who were very critical of Obama, saying, like, you cannot bring these people to the United States. These are not common criminals. These are terrorists. We can't give them rights. We can't say they have a right to an attorney. It's a whole different situation. It was example A for them. Look how naive Obama is. He thought he could do this, and this guy almost walked free. And they were right. He did almost walk free.
The evidence to me is fascinating, though, and this is like one of the things I wanted to tease out because in that case, you have a witness standing against this guy. In the case of Spin Ghoul, as soon as I told Kelly, it's almost like in Austin Powers, the guy, if you ask him a third time, he has to tell you exactly what he's done. As soon as they pick apart at him a little bit and kind of edge him, he just spills his guts, writes out a biography, tells people what he wants to do. He wants to kill Americans. He is transparent. And you point out that this is kind of common. These guys are doing it for the rep. They're doing it to show that they are committed. And if you even question, like, you're really doing this for that, they spill their guts. And to me has to be an amazing situation to be in as a prosecutor. The guy's sitting here looking you in the eye saying he's doing it. But then you're like, can we bring him to justice?
Well, also the big question was at that point when they're hearing the confession in this Italian courtroom in 2011, the big question is he crazy? Is this real? Is he telling the truth, or is he just some nut job that they found on a boat? But his story is convincing enough in terms of the details he knows and the names of the terrorists that he met up with in 2002, 2003 in Pakistan and Afghanistan, not commonly known names of people, even to this day, people Haji or Farad, people that nobody would know unless you actually worked in counterterrorism. And one of the things that's interesting is because I remember asking Dave Bitcower, one of the assistant U.S. attorneys who's one of the main characters in the book, who's the guy who told me about this to begin with, he's the dad of a son of my son's friend. And we just, we're talking and he told me this incredible story. Why? Why would he confess to this? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One, he had been in a Libyan prison being tortured for like 5 or 6 years. So he was just out and not thinking clearly and just like
being hung upside down
and
right?
tortured. Yeah.
And yeah.
So he wasn't thinking clearly. But beyond that, Bitcower and others say these guys often, as you note, share their stories because they're proud of them. They're proud of them. Bitcower went to Yale. At one point, he was writing a piece for the Yale Daily News when he was an undergraduate, and he got to interview Ron Darling, who was a Yale pitcher who went on to become a very successful Major League Baseball pitcher. He won a World Series with the Mets in '86. And when he interviewed Ron Darling, he wanted to talk to Ron Darling about a no-hitter he pitched when he was in college. Now, what Bitcower says is like Ron Darling remembered every single detail about that day when he was in college, even though he'd gone on to much bigger things with the Mets. And back when the Mets were good. And they're not bad this year. I'm just joking. But I'll say this.
We can trash the Mets here.
Well, I don't know who your allegiances are to. And I just jinxed the Phillies by saying that. But in any case, Bitcower says that Spin Ghoul talking about his attempts and his successful attempts to kill Americans and to commit acts of terrorism reminded him of Ron Darling talking about the no-hitter he pitched. It was his best day. It was a very exciting professional moment for him, and that's what it is. And we think of these guys as zealots, as psychos, as evil, and they could be all of that, sure. But in addition to that, they're human beings and they have egos and they remember things. And if that's your best day and you're being asked about it, you're gonna share the story.
Let's talk about the evidence for a second. The specific, he is traced to a battlefield, right? To a battle, to a specific battle
Well, it
there on
takes
the.
them. They have to figure out which battle it was because they don't know. And Spin doesn't have like a day planner. And terrorists back then, like in 2002, 2003 in Afghanistan, they might not be aware of. I don't even know if they use like Roman months or days or whatever. They might be going by the Islamic month, or they might not even have any idea. I mean, of what a date is. But he has no idea. He doesn't even know what year it was. So they're asking him in this Italian courtroom, and it's a very arduous process. Not, I don't make it arduous in the book, but I'm telling you it was arduous. Where because he only speaks Arabic and Hausa, which is an African language, and so they have a translator who translates it from Hausa or Arabic to Italian for the judge, and then again Hausa or Arabic to English for the Americans who are there, who the Italians have invited to come and ask questions of this guy. And at one point, Shreve Ariel, who's one of the other assistant U.S. attorneys, is trying to figure out when this was. And he asks him when it was. Can you give me any sort of date? Was it during Ramadan? Was it, anything like that? And Spingul, through the translator, says that it was around the time of the visit of Ramses V. And Bitcower and Shreve are like, oh, shit, he's crazy. He thinks the pharaohs are still alive. Like he thinks Ramses V is still alive. Oh my God, we're not going to be able to bring this to the United States, and he's going to go free because, like any second-year law student, could get a crazy guy off. He thinks the pharaohs are still alive. How can you believe anything he has to say? So the testimony continues, and then again it comes up, Ramses V. So Shreve again says, "Okay, well, hold on, let me drill down on that again. Who are we talking about?" And the translator and Spingul go back and forth about what exactly Spingul is saying in Hausa that is now being trying to translate it into Italian into English. And he says, oh, no, he's not saying Ramses. He's saying Rumsfeld. He's saying Rumsfeld, and he's not saying the fifth. He's saying Pentagon. The Pentagon has 5 sides. And they're all like, oh God, they breathe a sigh of relief. So then they figure, okay, so it was a battle that took place around this visit of Rumsfeld to the region. And so from there, dealing with a whole bunch of experts, including this like Rain Man kind of guy, Hodgson from military intelligence, they figure out it was probably this one battle on April 25th, 2003. And then they go and they try to track down all these service members. So all of this is just to illustrate, I'm sorry to interrupt, but all of this is just to illustrate like there was nothing easy about any step of the way. Everything was this arduous process of figuring things out and then trying to find, okay, this is what he says. How can we prove that that actually happened? So sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean that's kind of where I wanted you to go with this. And it was hard. It was hard to get the service members to talk. Some of them, right? They didn't want to talk.
Yeah, look, it's the worst day of their lives. I mean, this ambush, 2 Americans were killed, Private Jared Dennis and Airman First Class Ray Lozano. 3 or 4 were very seriously wounded. One guy, it looked like he had his jaw shot off. Others like, and yeah, I mean, it was one of the things that the prosecutors and the FBI agents talked about was the guilt that they felt having to track these guys down and talk to even the ones that weren't seriously injured. It was the worst day of their lives, and it psychologically affected them greatly. Many of them ended up getting divorced. Many of them, one guy testified during the victim impact statement towards the end of the trial. When it was sentencing, one guy talked about how his marriage fell apart because of this. Because of this day, he felt like he had failed the service members who were injured and killed. Another guy talked about how his sisters confronted him. They were scared of him. They thought he was going to snap and kill them and others. I mean, so this really caused this ambush was a horrible, horrible experience. So to ask them to relive it was a very difficult thing. And I think they got to everyone except there was one guy. There was one guy they tracked down, and he wouldn't talk to me either for the book. And look, God bless. I mean, like I can't imagine anything like this. I'm not faulting him, but they, other than one guy, they couldn't. They got everyone to cooperate, and when they left that one guy, Matura Brown, who was, I think, one of the first people shot. His leg was shot, and he lost a lot of blood, and he could have died, but he didn't. But when they tracked him down and they drove to his house in Arizona, on the way out, on the way back when they left, the FBI agents were talking to the assistant U.S. attorneys, and the FBI agents were like, "You can't call him, like you can't force him to testify because it will just utterly crush him." And the assistant U.S. attorneys understood the argument that the FBI guys were making, but at the end of the day, they were like, if we have to, we will, just because we need to lock this guy up forever. And if we need to know, they ultimately don't. They ultimately don't have to call him. But it's just to illustrate, like, these are big, strong, tough guys who enlisted in the military and were there after 9/11 in Afghanistan. And like, you know, it's we're all human, and a lot of them were really broken.
How was it I mean, I'm imagining you interviewed some of them.
Most of them, yeah, almost all of them. It's this is my second book about war. I did a book called The Outpost that came out in 2012, and so I've done this before. Talked to Medal of Honor recipients who weep on the phone with me, and so I've done it before. It's very humbling because I personally know like how incredible they are, how brave they are, how valorous they are, and to have them weeping is a very humbling experience. And you want so you want to protect their story as a valuable commodity, and you want to make sure that you tell the story right and that they are honored and that their fallen battle buddies are honored. So that's important. But there's also this other imperative, which is for the prosecutors and the FBI agents, it was, we need to bring this guy to justice. And for me, it was, the best way I can honor these men and women is by telling their story. The best way that I can make sure that people know the names Jared Dennis and Ray Lozano and have heard of Firebase Skin or Spin Ghoul is to write this book. So that's the imperative I have, and I try to explain it, and most people get it. Most people understand it. Like, of the two families, like of fallen service members, one family was more cooperative than the other, and it's not. I don't take any offense on it. These are difficult things to talk about.
Well, you even say in the book that it's only during the trial that Jared Dennis's family really hears the details of his last
Yeah,
day.
no, this is one of the things that's, I guess I understand it, but very few people who lose loved ones in battle ever get the full story as to what happened. And there are lots of reasons for it. Sometimes people are killed because somebody screwed up. Sometimes people are killed in horribly graphic ways. Sometimes people screw up on a mission that didn't have to happen. And there's all these reasons for it. But I do find it, uh, yeah, I mean, like I told Dennis's mom, I don't know if she's read the book. I don't know if she will. That's one of the other things about these books is like sometimes the service members don't read them. And I certainly understand that. But I believe I told Jared Dennis's mom what his last words were, or the last words that I know that he said, which was he was joking around, and which was a lovely thing because Jared Dennis was kind of like a class clown, and everybody loved him because he had a great sense of humor. And somebody said to him, somebody introduced themselves, one of the military police introduced themselves to him when they found him. He'd been missing after this ambush and he was bleeding out, and they found him and he introduced himself. And Jared Dennis is like, like, nice to meet you. I'm sucking, meaning I suck. As opposed, like this is not good. But it was like, trying to make people laugh to the last possible moment, which was, but yeah, but people don't, they don't tell the Gold Star families these things, which, and it's, it's not me to judge, but it's kind of a shame.
As a writer, how do you recreate a battle? A battle?
Holy crap! It's the toughest. It's the toughest journalistically. It's the toughest thing to do.
Could,
It is.
could you capture that? You talk about this being a thriller. I mean, there are
Yeah.
many moments where you feel the tension. That battle, you feel it was really well captured,
Thank you.
and evoked emotion reading it. So, just curious, just because you've probably written something almost every day of the last 20 or 30 years, just in your line of work. And so
Yeah.
recreating that, I'm just curious from a writer's perspective.
There are some things like, and first of all, let me just preface this by saying, like, I'm not asking for pity, and I'm not saying that what I do is difficult, and I'm not saying like this even compares remotely to what these service members go through. But just journalistically, it is a challenge to recreate a battle because they're chaotic, they're painful, they're horrific experiences, and every single person has a completely different perspective of what happened. We all know the famous Japanese movie Rashomon, where like five people see something and every one of them has a completely different movie in them about what happened, and that's what battles are like. And so taking a battle that dozens of people participated in and turning it into a narrative that makes sense and is cohesive and is accurate is challenging. It's something that you like really have to like. Okay, I'm going to do the battle today. And again, I'm not saying this is a painful experience, but I'm just saying as a writerly issue, it's a challenge. And one of the things, honestly, that I do is I write it and I share it with the people that I'm writing about because I want to make sure that I'm getting it all right. And I say, like, here's my latest draft of the battle. Tell me what's going on. Tell me if you think this is accurate. Tell me. And like people will weigh in. That's not what happened, or I was more over here, or don't forget this person, this and that. But that's the best way I have figured out, even though it's generally not traditional for a journalist to share their work with somebody. I just because these subjects are so painful, and I want to make sure that I have everything 100% accurate, and also that there are no surprises for people when the book comes out. I found that like doing the tough work before it's published is preferable to to after it's published when you find out that you got something wrong.
I wonder, as you're telling this story, one of the things to me that was really fascinating was Spingold's account of how he came to this drive
I'm so lucky that just narratively, because he confessed everything and he told his whole story to this Italian courtroom. But when he came to the United States, he stopped cooperating. He shut up, he clammed up, and then he started acting like a freak in court. So his cooperation was limited, and I did make a request, but he would not participate with this book. But because he had told his entire narrative from childhood inspiration, from hearing glorious tales in Saudi Arabia, his family was from Niger. His parents were basically, whatever one step up from slaves is.
You say like indentured servants, like they don't
basically
land,
in Saudi Arabia. Yeah. However bad people think racism is in the United States, go to Saudi Arabia, see what it's like there. But in any case, his parents were indentured servants, and he grew up hearing in the way that the three of us heard stories about Springsteen or Mike Schmidt or whatever. Like his stories were about jihadists, about people who fought. And not necessarily bad guy jihadists in this way that we think about them, but people who fought the Soviets in Afghanistan, people who fought Putin and the Russian army in Chechnya, people who maybe like at the time Americans were rooting for,
We definitely were rooting for.
Yeah. And so, we were arming them in the case of Afghanistan. So those were his stories that he grew up listening to. And then when he was old enough, there was a jihadi legend in the neighborhood who hooked him up, and next thing he knew, he was on a plane to Pakistan. And hearing his story was just so you seldom get it. You seldom just like, okay, here's a bad guy, and I mean, I'm not saying I sympathize with Spingool in any way. I don't, but it was, there are a couple chapters that are just him telling his story. And obviously I judge it negatively, but like I wanted to just like let him tell this is how he came to be an Al-Qaeda operative firing weapons at American soldiers in Afghanistan. This is it. And it just, that insight into the killer was really just interesting for me.
The account he has of the process, and I know there's got to be more to it, but almost this grooming that takes place where a man shows him a military magazine, and just gets his response. Yeah, and he sees a picture of the Pentagon, and he says to this guy, he doesn't know the guy's a recruiter. He says, "Do you think we could steal a plane and fly it into the Pentagon?"
This
and
is
the guy,
before 9/11, we should note. Yeah.
yes, and apparently the guy doesn't say anything. He just walks away, and the next thing you know, he's been recruited.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
I'm sure that recruiting operation is still, by the way, fully functional in Saudi Arabia. I mean, like, it's not as though uh, terrorists coming from Saudi Arabia is a new thing as far as this country's concerned. I think 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were Saudi.
And these were not people in the shadows either. These were officials. That's what
Oh yeah, the guy
the
worked for the
two.
government. Yeah, that recruiter worked for the government. So much of this just happened just out in plain sight, and it's not as if I don't think they had to like travel in any secretive way in Pakistan. Now, after 9/11, things changed a bit. And in fact, when the prosecutors are looking for witnesses, not just US soldiers, but anyone else that might be in custody, um, there is this guy, Muhammad Ashafa, who was like an errand boy for Spingool when Spingool, after he successfully ambushed Americans in Saudi Arabia, he wanted to do bigger and better things, in quote unquote, bigger and better things. And this other big time Al Qaeda terrorist operative, Abu Hamza, sends him to Nigeria. Bin Laden has issued a tape saying here are some countries that we need to commit jihad in. They are too cozy with the Westerners and the infidels, and Nigeria is one of them. And because they speak Hausa in Nigeria, and Spingul, who is from Niger, speaks Hausa, they send him there, and he wants to blow up the U.S. embassies there, and he gets hooked up with a whole bunch of terrorists in these groups that ultimately become Boko Haram and ISIS. Is it ISIS? Yeah, Boko Haram and ISIS. But they weren't called that at the time. And yeah, I mean, and anyway, he hooks up with Muhammad Ashafa, and Muhammad Ashafa gets caught at one point, and that's when Spingul flees Nigeria. But the Muhammad Ashafa part of this is interesting because he's taken into custody by the Pakistanis, and then he's taken to Nigeria, and the Americans can't use his testimony because he's been tortured within an inch of his life. Nothing he says can be used in a court of law, but they have to figure out how can we prove that his story about Muhammad Ashafa did happen without using Muhammad Ashafa. So that's a whole other challenge. But every teeny little bit of his testimony of his life story, they have to prove in a court of law within an inch of their lives because they cannot risk this guy being found not guilty in any way, whether it's not guilty by reason of insanity or not guilty, period. And he walks outside and blows up a Brooklyn Starbucks.
When you realize, or as you learned that the testimony of these terrorists that was, things they said while they were being tortured or after they were tortured was inadmissible in a court of law. What did that make you think about the prosecution of the war on terror? Like from 9/12 on, right? When the idea we're going to take these people to these CIA black sites and we're gonna get information out of them by like waterboarding them and this and that. Like, just how do you think that it wasn't thought all the way through at the time?
It's tough to say. I will say that it matters less what I think about it than what our allies thought, because one of the things about the Italians is that they will not hand over Spingool unless he's headed for a criminal court, not Guantanamo, not a military commission, and B, if the death penalty is off the table. And because at this point in 2011, 2012, the Italians, our allies, are so disgusted by the way the U.S. has been prosecuting the war on terror. Uh, in addition to enhanced interrogation, aka torture, or CIA black sites, aka torture chambers, or all the other nomenclature that's introduced during this era, there's this thing called extraordinary rendition, which is basically the U.S. kidnapping terrorists or people they suspect to be terrorists from foreign countries and taking them wherever they want. Sometimes they do it with the cooperation of the government, sometimes they don't, of the government of that country. And the Italians at this point have prosecuted Americans in the military and the CIA in absentia for the extraordinary rendition of an Egyptian cleric who had fled Egypt, was in Italy, and then the Americans, for want of a better term, kidnapped him. And he was tortured, et cetera, et cetera. So the decisions that were made, even if one assumes, okay, let's just assume the best of why Bush, Rumsfeld, Cheney, et cetera, did what they did. They thought they needed to do it to keep Americans safe. They thought like it's a ticking clock on all of these interrogations that we need to know. We don't want any more Americans to be killed the way that almost 3,000 Americans were killed on 9/11. Even if one grants them every benefit of every doubt, it is hard to argue that it wasn't short-sighted because uh, so many of these guys who could have been prosecuted and maybe locked away forever are now either at Gitmo or more likely have been freed or sent to other countries where they probably were freed. And some of them have returned to the battlefield, and that's because the you could I guess one could argue that Obama or Bush or whoever shouldn't have freed any of them, but that's kind of crazy given the fact that there was very little evidence when it came to individuals, so specific individuals. But B, like Spin is such a great case because he would have killed, like, there's no question in my mind that he would have killed as many Americans as possible the first chance he got, or even, or maybe even more dastardly in some sort of nefarious plot to kill hundreds of Americans. But because these prosecutors and FBI agents, et cetera, did what they did, he's locked away forever. He's no longer a threat. He's got, spoiler alert, he goes to prison at the end of the book. But I still think that it's worth reading for anybody listening.
Yeah.
But like, because the war on terror was not waged initially like that, there are a lot of guys who are not in prison who maybe could have been. Now, look, it's easy to do that. 2020 hindsight, Monday morning quarterbacking, all that. I get it, but it's hard not to look at some of these decisions and think that did not ultimately make us safer. That maybe made us unsafer because of now that guy's free.
The subtitle of the book is Chasing an Al Qaeda Killer at the Dawn of the Forever War. Dawn of the Forever War, 2001. It's 2025.
Yeah.
Right? Surely the war on terror still continues. However, like the whole time I read this book, and it was over the course of about 2 or 3 weeks, I just kept thinking, Ben here has a PhD, is a doctor in Russian history. And so he and I have talked about after the end of the Cold War, what happened to America? We didn't have our enemy. We didn't have our collective purpose of being better than the Russians, right? We didn't with the Soviet Union. We didn't have that. What happens in the 90s? Oklahoma City bombing, Ruby Ridge. Then we get 9/11, we get Al Qaeda. Once again we have a unifying enemy. Well, Biden, Trump, they've kind of ended the war on terror, right? Or it's not the battle it was even a decade ago with ISIS. So where are we today in the war on terror if it still continues?
Well, I don't think we get to, as they say in the military, the enemy gets a vote, and I don't think the war on terror is over because I think, first of all, there's, as you noted with your references to Ruby Ridge and Oklahoma City, it's not just an external problem. There's a lot of domestic terrorism. I mean, the assassination of Charlie Kirk was arguably an act of terrorism. Anytime you're using violence to make a political point, it's terrorism. But in terms of the terror threat from groups like Al Qaeda or ISIS, I don't think it's over. It's kind of evolved into a more of a domestic, homegrown terrorist threat. There was a terrorist attack January 1st in New Orleans by a guy who was inspired by ISIS. So that continues. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that goes on that we don't know about in terms of the disruption of terrorist cells. But the argument that we have to kill them over there so that we don't have to kill them over here, or so that they don't kill us over here, I think is one that Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden all went along with the idea that like we have to be as aggressive overseas as we can be to disrupt these cells so they don't do anything to us. But it hasn't ended, and um, there will be more terrorist attacks in the United States. I mean, I don't hope for it. I hope it doesn't happen. But just like, while I was writing this book, there were other ones, including that January 1st one. I don't think that the war is over. I think that Trump and Biden talk about it less than Bush and Obama did. I also think that it just doesn't capture our attention the same way. I think that there is almost, if we found out right now that there was a terrorist attack in city A, Chicago or whatever, and like 10 people were killed, we would cover it, and there would be an investigation. But I'm not saying we're getting used to it, but it has become kind of the background of this happens in this country now, like school shootings, like all sorts of other horrific acts of violence. Like I think we are just inured to it to a degree, but it still continues, and there's still like a lot of focus on making sure it doesn't happen again.
One of the things that struck me with this, Jake, was like all the conspiracy theories during COVID. I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what people are saying. And it always surprised me that there was never one person, prominent conspiracy theorist that I saw that said something about they're trying to make us cover our face like these terrorists do. None of that came up. And it seems like that's such low hanging fruit. I mean, for God's sakes, the things they say are so ridiculous, right?
Well, it is true that a lot of protesters put on the COVID masks, and it's probably because they're trying to hide their identity. These are protesters, not terrorists.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
probably trying to hide their identities. And it is true that like a lot of Antifa and people who do get violent also do that with the masks. So but it's, you're right. I haven't heard that, but that doesn't mean that nobody out there has
Oh,
said
yeah, it does. The internet is a wide, deep, sad forest.
Yeah.
So when you bring a terrorist into the United States court system, the judicial system, they get rights.
Yep.
Talk about
immediately.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and that was one of the arguments against bringing Spin to the United States is because once you bring somebody here and you try them in a criminal court, they get the same rights that any of us would get if we were a defendant, a right to an attorney, a right to, be silent, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the prosecutors were lucky that Spingal had done this confession already in Italy and that the judge found it admissible. But then Spingal, all of a sudden, for the first time in his life, had three really smart attorneys working for him and trying to do everything they could to defend him one way or the other. They decided that having him declared mentally incompetent, insane, would be an appropriate attempt to get him the help and care that he needed in their view. But it is something that you get in this country, and a lot of people didn't want that to happen. A lot of people, like the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, didn't want that to happen when he heard about there was an attempt to bring another terrorist to the United States for trial. And the deputy FBI director, Andy McCabe, was making this argument to Attorney General Jeff Sessions in 2017, and Sessions didn't want it. Why are we giving these guys rights? They're terrorists, and they're not even here in the United States. Why would you bring them here and then therefore have them get afforded the same rights we all get? And they couldn't convince him otherwise. He didn't say, and you couldn't say at that point, and Spin shouldn't get rights either because the case was already ongoing and it was too late. He was in the United States. But that argument is still pretty strong. Although I have to say, the Trump administration, as I noted, like they are trying one of the conspirators of the Abbey Gate bombing in 2021, a guy named Jafar. They're trying him in a criminal court in Virginia right now. And there's been no hue and outcry, nobody that I can see arguing that this guy's going to get out and kill us all, and nobody's ascribing to him Thanos-like powers, and that's how we have, I think, as a country, grown and become a bit more sophisticated than we were when the Spin case was going on in 2011, 2012, and people were terrified. They were terrified of a terrorist going to a prison down the street. Terrified. They thought he was going to escape, and these people are capable of such evil. And it wasn't just Republicans that were saying that; it was Democrats too. Chuck Schumer didn't want these the terrorists, the conspirators behind 9/11, to be brought to New York for trial.
There's a CSI factor to this story.
I hope so.
But there's a legitimate, very important CSI factor with one of the sole pieces of evidence that was found at the battlefield.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to spoil too much, but I will say that that if for anybody who's interested in fingerprint evidence, which I think we all are, there's a chapter on this and on Nicole Bagley, who, as luck would have it, was the um, fingerprint expert at Quantico when this all happened. And she's a fascinating character unto herself. She was raised in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She wanted to be a veterinarian. Then she volunteered at the shelter, and it was too painful to put animals to sleep. So she was back home, didn't know what she wanted to do. And she and her mom are watching TV, and Crossing Jordan comes on TV with Jill Hennessy. It's another police procedural. And the mom says, "You could do that." And she says, "Yeah, I could." And she goes to West Virginia University, and graduates with a degree in criminology and fingerprinting, goes to Quantico. And she's this, again, the character right out of a novel or a movie where she's red hair and a nose ring and neck tats and all this stuff, funky girl. And she is charged with trying to find fingerprint evidence of Spingool that would tie him to this actual battlefield. Because and all the prosecutors refer to the TV show CSI. They all talk about it. Juries love that CSI shit, they say. Juries love it. And most cases are not lucky enough to have a fingerprint tying a murderer to the crime scene. If only it were that easy. But Nicole Bagley is charged with that, and I'll let people read the book to find out what she finds. But it was really fun to tell that story because I all I knew about fingerprint evidence was basically what I'd seen on TV,
Right.
and so it was fun diving a little bit deeper into it.
I know we're running out of time, but I want to conclude with one question, Jake, because you have both as the author of this book and as someone who is engaged in kind of chronicling this country in real time. This story that you tell, it transcends from the Bush presidency across through Obama, through Trump. And, there is this sense now that with this Trump administration that there's being more damage done, that there has been a complete reversal away from America's engagement with the world. But when you follow this story, it doesn't seem to me like this may be an acceleration of it, but it seems like this question of America's place within the international legal structure has been in flux, really, at least for the time period you're covering, at least since Bush. And I wonder if this gives you a new way of looking at this.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, just the idea that, the way that we feel about our politicians, and it's the Bush era, the Obama era, et cetera, et cetera. People who aren't American don't necessarily look at it that way. They just look at the America, arrogant, imperialistic, doing whatever we want to do. I mean, I'm sure they differentiate between Obama and Trump, but at the same time, like, the Italians are mad at the United States when this is going on, and they don't care that Obama's the president, and that the stuff that they're upset about took place during Bush. First of all, it doesn't matter because it's all just who the American people elected. It's all just the American government. Second of all, Obama prosecuted the war on terror fairly aggressively too. I mean, wanted to do the court system and the prosecution of terrorists differently, but he used drone warfare, I think, like 100 times more than Bush, something like that. And our European friends are pretty critical of us no matter what. So while I would never want to negate the difference between Obama and Trump or Biden and Trump, because there are differences, at the same time, there is this continuum where people across the ocean think that we're arrogant and we act like we can do things that other countries aren't allowed to do. And that's been the case during Obama's presidency, Bush, Trump, et cetera. And just one other note, just to compare, because I do think we've kind of, as a country, settled into this vaguely consensus view of how to handle terrorism that is no longer Bush and no longer Obama, but somewhere in between ideologically. Um, and yet, even then, you see presidents like, Obama took the Bush drone use of drones and did it 100 times more. And now Trump is using the authorities that Obama was using to do Trump warfare against alleged terrorists in Yemen or wherever, in which he killed American citizens, by the way. Anwar al-Awlaki was an American. He was a Al-Qaeda cleric, and so not a lot of people shed a tear, but it was an extrajudicial killing of him. And I think his nephew was killed also, like a 11-year-old or something. But beyond that, Trump has taken that power, and he is now using that power to kill narco terrorists, that people he designates narco terrorists in the Atlantic Ocean, that he says, well, they're killing Americans through drugs, and so I have a right to use the U.S. military to shoot down these boats. So it's again, probably not a lot of Americans are shedding a tear over these alleged narco terrorists, and Trump did, take the formal declaration and say Tren de Aragua, this terrorist group, is a narco terrorist group, and we're designating that. But by the same token, it is all this continuum of America doing whatever it wants to do, and other countries like, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
These are the costs, human and democratic, of carrying on a forever war.
Yeah. Well, and now we're including drug cartels as part of the forever war, which is not how I mean it when I say forever war, but in terms of how President Trump is using his powers, it is. But I don't think I mean, it's one of the situations that is facing the Israelis right now with Netanyahu and that horrible war in Gaza, which is this idea that they're going to try to kill every member of Hamas. Like, you can't kill every member of Hamas because Hamas is an idea, it's an ideology.
Yep.
It might be an evil one, but it's still an ideology. It's the same thing with Al Qaeda. You can't kill I mean, we can be, there are ways to do it, and I'm not saying we shouldn't try to protect ourselves, but you can't kill Islamism, is this extremist view of Islam. Like, you can't kill your way out of it. It's an ideology. It has to be defeated in other ways. Or
Yes.
not just militarily. There have to be other efforts too. And the idea that, like, uh, we're only going to handle it militarily, I think, is a mistake.
I know we're short of time here, but talked about the connection to Saudi Arabia.
Well, I mean, as we know, that 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were Saudi, and Spin Ghoul, even though his family's heritage is from Niger, he was born in Saudi Arabia as an indentured servant, as we've discussed. And, like, you know, uh, I know that there are geopolitical reasons why every single president cozies up to the dictator ruling Saudi Arabia, whoever it is at any given time. And right now it's this young guy, MBS. But there's a lot of stuff that they tolerate in that country that comes back to kill Americans and other Westerners, because they would rather have the terrorism, they'd rather export it than keep it in-house, because I mean, a lot of dictators in Muslim countries, Muslim majority countries, treat their Islamic extremists very brutally because they know that they're coming for them. Whether it's in Egypt or Gaddafi. We talked about Spin Ghoul being locked up for 5.5 years. Gaddafi was a maniac, but he locked up people like Spin Ghoul because he knew they were coming for him. Um, Remember, after the Arab Spring, Egypt elected a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is an extremist group. And then there was a coup. There was a coup, and General al-Sisi and the United States did not bat an eye, because we would prefer to have a strong man in that country. When I say we, I mean our leaders would prefer to have a strong man ruling that country. So, I mean, that's what's going on with Saudi Arabia too. And again, I understand the geopolitical dynamics and oil and fossil fuels and this and that, but we sure tolerate a lot from that country. Whether it's the export of extremism, or when Jamal Khashoggi, who had American residency, was killed by at orders of MBS, according to our intelligence structure. And again, this is about, I'm talking about the Saudi government, not
Yeah.
Saudi people. But it's pretty shocking.
Well, it's a kingdom. It's a
Yeah.
kingdom.
Did you ever see the movie The Kingdom?
No.
Oh, it's a I don't know if you know Peter Berg. He's this great filmmaker. He did Lone Survivor and he did Patriots Day. He does a lot of movies about terrorism, but it's an early movie by Peter. He did Friday Night Lights. He did the movie Friday Night Lights,
Okay.
and the TV show. And he did a movie called The Kingdom. Oh God, years ago. Jamie Foxx was in it. It was good. It's just an interesting take on Saudi Arabia and the role that they play when it comes to terrorism. Kind of playing both sides of the street.
Yeah.
Ben, you have anything else?
No, I mean, I've either got that's it, or I've got 6 more hours of conversation. So let's go with
Well, I do
let's
have to
with
go
the
to
former.
work.
Jake,
Yeah,
is there
yeah.
is there anything that you want to say about the book that we didn't?
No,
we didn't ask about?
I just I hope people read it. It was a lot of pleasure. I mean, I wrote it as a thriller, but I also kind of wrote it as a love letter to the people who try to keep us safe, and just like demonstrating whether it's the private on the front lines in Afghanistan or the U.S. attorneys and assistant U.S. attorneys and FBI agents. Like we hear so much crap talk about our government, and some of it I do, but here are the hardworking men and women really trying to do a job for not a lot of money and really long hours. And in this case, they did something really great. They took a guy who wanted to kill as many Americans as possible. They took him off the street forever.
Yeah. Well, Jake, I felt that gratitude when reading the book, so you delivered. The book is Race Against Terror, Chasing an Al-Qaeda Killer at the Dawn of the Forever War. Our guest, Jake Tapper. What a great work. And now I guess you got to go to your other job.
I got to go to my other job. Thank you, guys. This was a real pleasure.
Thank you, Jake. We appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to The Road to Now. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell the world by giving us 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts or 5 stars on Spotify. Or spread the word directly. Just text a friend maybe, or share a link on social media. Anything helps and we appreciate it. And if you've got a friend who hasn't gotten into podcasts yet, let them know they can hear us every weekend on SiriusXM's POTUS Channel 124. Now is the time when we say our special thanks to our supporters on Patreon and give a shout out to our Washingtonians. That list is Tanya Marsh, Mary Hawking, Tim and Caitlin Wells, Fig White, Matt Williams, Team Martin, Ann Williams and Frank Edwards, Nate Farrer, Jennifer and Magnolia, Chris and Teresa Adams, Joy Avery, Edward Carlson, and Aaron and Derek Garrison. Thanks to all you guys for supporting us. If you want to support our work and maybe get on that list, you can join us on Patreon at patreon.com/theroadtonow. You'll get extended versions of select conversations, extra episodes, bonus materials, and more. That's all available at patreon.com/theroadtonow. For more on the show, visit our website, theroadtonow.com, where you can easily search our back catalog and quickly find links to content. Why is it so good? 7 Ages Design. That's who made it. If you're looking for a website, go check them out. The Road to Now is hosted and produced by Bob Crawford and me, Ben Sawyer. Our associate producer is Gary Fletcher. This episode was edited by Ben Sawyer, and our theme music, like pretty much always, was by Paul DeFiglia. For Bob Crawford, this is Ben Sawyer. Thank you for listening. Take care.